So going through Ecclesiastes, we're mainly going to do a chapter at a time. So it's always quite a little bit of reading at the beginning of every sermon. But we're going to try to do Ecclesiastes in under 3 months. And so we're doing it this way to see if we can make that happen. I'm going to have to, and if I stop to think about something on the paper, it's all in Icelandic, so I had to, and I'll be reading from here. So Ecclesiastes, we're going to do the whole chapter 1 through 22. For everything there is a season and a time for every matter under heaven. A time to be born and a time to die. A time to plant and a time to pluck up what is planted. A time to kill and a time to heal. A time to break down and a time to build up. A time to weep and a time to laugh. A time to mourn and a time to dance. A time to cast away stones and a time to gather stones together. A time to embrace and a time to refrain from embracing. A time to seek and a time to lose. A time to keep and a time to cast away. A time to tear and a time to sow. A time to keep silence and a time to speak. A time to love and a time to hate. A time for war and a time of peace. What gain has the worker from his toil? I have seen the business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, he has put eternity into man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. I perceived that there is nothing better for them than to be joyful and to do good as long as they live. Also, that everyone should eat and drink and take pleasure in all his toil. This is God's gift to man. I perceive that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nor anything taken from it. God has done it, so that people fear before him. That which is already has been, that which is to be already has been, and God seeks what has been driven away. Moreover, I saw under the sun that in the place of justice even there was wickedness, and in the place of righteousness even there was wickedness. I said in my heart, God will judge the righteous and the wicked, for there is a time for every matter and for every work. I said in my heart with regard to the children of man that God has testing them, that they may see that they themselves are but beasts. For what happens to the children of man and what happened to the beast is the same. As one dies, so dies the other. They all have the same breath, and a man has no advantages over the beasts, for all is vanity. All go to one place. All are from the dust, and to dust all return. Who knows whether the spirit of man goes upward and the spirit of the beast goes down into the earth? So I saw that there is nothing better than that a man should rejoice in his work, for that is his lot. Who can bring him to see what will be after him? All right, so it's a pretty dramatic text, and I was remembering, especially when I read this first part, this sort of poetic poem that Solomon has given to us. And I remember a conversation I had with sort of this New Age believer, and we were talking about what she believed exactly, because I was kind of interested. She had died for a few minutes and saw Jesus Christ, and came back and was an atheist before and came back, and now she was a believer, but she also believed in some Indian guy and she just called him the Indian and some light being and Jesus Christ. There's always these three guys following her. And so I was talking to her, and she believed in the idea of reincarnation. That you're just sort of, you die and you can become another being, and how you live just sort of determines of whether you get to be a level 7 being, which is like a light being. And so it was really it's Gnostic roots, really, that flesh is evil, physical possessions is evil, and your whole goal in life is to not want to be tied down in physicality, what she believed. And so I asked her, so how is it that people come to earth, and what is the place like? So she believed that people before they're born get to choose who they are. And I asked her, what's the situation like? What are they like when they choose who they are? And they say they're light beings. It's perfect. Everything. There's There's no sadness. There's no tears. And I asked her, who in the world would pick in a perfect environment to be someone like Hitler? Why would someone in a perfect environment say, I want to be the guy who murders all these millions of people? And she couldn't answer. And I asked her, what is the purpose? What is the purpose of evil in the world? And so she said, the purpose of evil is to teach you. And she went on to say that, Hitler was a good guy to many people because he taught a lot of people something about life. And she even went on to say that her rapist, she was even thankful for what he did to her because he taught her a lot of something about life. And so I asked her, so if the purpose of evil is to teach you something, what is the end point? If we're always just reincarnating as something else, why are we learning? And is there a point to what we're learning? You can learn that, you have rough times, that the situation that you're in is not defining of whether you're a happy person or not, but what is the point of all the learning? And she couldn't answer. And I just remember in this conversation being really thankful for that Jesus Christ allows us to dwell in reality and mourn reality. That when we read this, like there's a time to celebrate, there's a time to dance, and there's a time to cry. So I can have hope as a Christian that because I am a child of God, He has everything in His hands and is working all things for the good of me, so that even in the most horrific circumstances, I can have hope that He works things out for the good of me and for all of His children. But I can also stand and I mourn that someone is doing evil things. I don't have to say I'm thankful for what a rapist does or a murderer does because he teaches me something. I can mourn the actions, yet have hope, whatever the actions are. And so I was just, during that time, I was really thankful for Christianity being grounded in reality and not sort of creating a world of fantasy, where we have to pretend like everything is okay. We can actually mourn. We can actually, know that life is a roller coaster in this sin-fallen humanity. But I was also remembering in that conversation that I came from sort of a background where the idea was that God, if you're a Christian, you should be smiling all the time. And I don't know if you've run into these types. I call them Botox Christians. So they're just like, when people go to Botox and they just can't do anything other than just like, oh. And so I call them Botox Christians, that they just sort of walk around, and like life is horrible, but man, God is good. It's just like this forced idea of Christianity, just sort of a really shallow view of joy, really. I mean, it's a really shallow view of joy, meaning that if you're not smiling, you must not have hope. When in reality, like we read the text today, and it goes against this idea of Botox Christianity. We can actually mourn evil. We can cry and we can celebrate. We can go through this roller coaster of life and experience the emotions, yet have hope in every single emotion. That's amazing to me. And everything has its time. And so the question of the preacher, Ecclesiastes is just called the preacher. It's the word is the preacher. And this is Solomon talking to us. And his question is really, okay, I know the reality of real life, that it is a roller coaster, that people weep and people cry of joy and people dance and people mourn and so on and so forth. But what is the point? Sort of like my thinking with the New Age lady is like, okay, if it's all for learning, what is the end point of the learning? What is the purpose of the learning? And so here he asks in verse 9, what gain has the worker from all his toil? And so he sees this as work. Of course, we cry and we celebrate, we work and we stop and enjoy life. But is there a purpose with my laughter? Is there a purpose behind my sorrow? Is there an end point? And his answer is verse 10. I've seen the business that God has given to the children of man to be busy with. He has made everything beautiful in its time. Also, He has put eternity into man's heart, yet so that he cannot find out what God has done from the beginning to the end. I perceive that there is nothing better for them than to be joyful and to do good as long as they live, also that everyone should eat and drink and take pleasure in all his toil. This is God's gift to man. And so Solomon is going around and he's really saying, sometimes I don't understand God. I know He has put eternity within my heart. I know that all these things, the pointlessness of all these experiences without God point me to a desire for eternity. Really point me a desire to be in my actual home. I may have a passport that's Icelandic or from Hong Kong or from England or whatever, but that's not our home. That's where we dwell in this physical world. Our joy, our hope is somewhere else. And so he's talking right here and says, you've put this in my heart. You put eternity within my heart because I yearn for a time when this suffering, when the sin is no longer causing me to weep and I can see you face to face. So he's saying, I experienced this. I know, God, that you're putting this into my heart, but yet I don't understand you sometimes. I don't understand your ways. It's kind of like what Isaiah said in Isaiah 55, 8 through 9. For my thoughts are not your thoughts. Neither are your ways my ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than yours, and my thoughts than your thoughts. And so the preacher, Solomon, he's sort of coming to this conclusion that I know you put eternity within my heart, yet I cannot understand your ways. I cannot understand why you do certain things, and I cannot get an answer for every question that I have. And so the conclusion that the preacher gets to is verses 12 and 13 to really just, I perceive that there's nothing better for them than to be joyful and to do good as long as they live. Also that everyone should eat and drink and take pleasure in all his toil. This is God's gift to man. And his conclusion is kind of funny. It's like, I know that you're sovereign, and so I'll just enjoy life. I know that you're sovereign. I know that you put eternity within my heart. I don't understand your ways. I don't understand what you're doing a lot of the time. But one thing I do, I know that you're good, and I know that you have a plan that's way better than mine. And so what I'll do is enjoy my work. I perceive that there's nothing better for them than to be joyful. To have joy and hope in the fact that He's there and He knows what He's doing. And I don't know if everyone here gets this analogy, but there's hand knit sweaters that Icelanders do. And so I don't know if I made the mistake once of wearing one inside out. And if you've seen a hand knit sweater from the inside, it doesn't. You see, there's a pattern there, but it just looks kind of like, did someone really put work into that? And so you see, there's a pattern, but it doesn't look nice. And so when I was thinking about this, I have this image in my mind where Solomon is saying, okay, I see the inside of the sweater. God, I see there's a pattern. I see there's a point to it. I see there's something that you're doing, but I don't quite see everything. I don't understand everything. Yet God is on the outside, and He sees the pattern that He's creating there. He sees the beauty in difficult circumstances, and in sorrow, and in joy, and in our hope. He sees these things. And so that's the idea that I got in my mind, and I had to ask myself, what do I see? Can I see just a rough pattern of what God is doing and still be okay with Him being in control? Knowing who He is and trusting that He will do what is good and He is good. Can I just sit back and say, I may not see the beauty of everything that you're doing, but you put eternity in my heart and your ways are higher than mine. And I trust you that you're seeking to make your name glorified, that in the end, we will all fall before your feet, and no one will have a question of whether you were righteous or whether you were good. We will see your goodness face to face. And then we go into these couple of verses there, 14 to 15. I perceive that whatever God does endures forever. Nothing can be added to it, nor anything taken from it. God has done it, so that people fear before him. That which is already has been, that which is to be already has been, and God seeks what has been driven away. I remember when I was in school and I was blown away by the idea that you can't create energy. All the different forms of energy, it's just manipulating energy that's already there into different forms of energy. And I was just blown away by that idea. That, man, not even the smartest person in the room can't create energy. Must not be that smart. But here he is saying, man, what God has done, it stands forever. And so I was kind of amazed at that point, just thinking all we can do is really manipulate. And I love what kind of the story of creation, because there's a Hebrew word for what God creates called barach. As the Hebrews are always like, barach. I think it's like brach. The Latin term for it is ex nihilo, or ex nihilo. I don't know how the Latins. I guess no one knows how they would pronounce things, but it's this idea that only one truly creates, the rest manipulate. And so this idea of barach is like creating out of nothing. Ex nihilo means out of nothing. Nihilo means nothing. Ex means out. And so the idea that when God creates, he creates. He's the only one who truly creates. There was a joke sometime when a scientist and God were talking, and the scientist says, "I can create life." "Oh, really?" says God. How are you gonna do that?" "Well, let me show you." And he gets a bucket of mud. Wait a minute. That's mine. So you can't really create nothing. All we have in the world, all we can do as human beings is manipulate what God has already created. And here he's showing us that. Man can't even create things. And the stuff that you create, manipulate, really, it doesn't last. But the work of God, it lasts. And so I view this as sort of God's call to man. Just to say, do you see the futileness of your work? Do you see how they don't last? Do you see how you can't really create? All you can do is manipulate is what I've already given you. Can you see? Can you see that there's someone greater than you? And if you see, can you stop shoving that idea down so that you could pretend that you're your own God, that you're your own authority, and turn to the one who is your authority? And it's in this sort of this roller coaster ride of life that God calls to man. Because if you see that nothing you do ultimately lasts forever, and you see how pointless it is without God, do you turn yourself to God, and you can experience hopelessness and just how futile and how quickly the work of man disappears. I mean, even just governments, huge things like governments go up and they go down in a few hundred years. Here I am, what am I leaving behind? What do I do? And how do I find that it's not hopeless without the view of God is the reason why I do these things? He's the reason of my life. He is the center point of all that I am. Whatever you do, eat or drink, do it all for the glory of God. And so the point of life is to glorify God by enjoying him forever. And you can experience this sort of a little bit of hopelessness when you realize that your work really won't last forever. Even someone huge in this world, even a dictator or someone who controls nations, he'll be forgotten in a few hundred years. I mean, I remember the Beatles said we're more popular than Jesus now. Go and ask a teenager what Beatles are, what the Beatles are. Some of them won't know. If they know, ask, do you remember any of their names? Probably not. Well, the Beatles are gone. Jesus stands forever. And it's amazing to see that. But in our hopelessness, even in the fact that we see that our work doesn't last forever, that it goes away so quickly, we have hope because God has really called us to partake in his work. And so in the fact that we see that all that I do, everything I'm centered in, dissipates and disappears into nothingness in a few years' time. If they don't remember the Beatles, they're not going to remember me in a decade or two. So the hope that we have as Christians is God is offering us to partake in his work. And so here we see, like we see in Matthew 28, 18 through 20. Go and make disciples of all the nations, preaching, baptizing them in the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit, teaching them to do all that I've commanded you to do. That's God really saying, your work is futile. Everything that you do will disappear and not matter in a few years' time. But if you partake in my mission, man, that will have an eternal impact. That has an eternal point to it. And so we also see that in 1 Peter 3:15, he says, always be ready to give a defense for the hope that is within you. And so when you're walking around in your school or your work, you have a point to your existence. And when you're working, you have a point. It's do it all to the glory of God. Whether I eat or I drink, do it all for the glory of God. Even as something as mundane as just drinking. Can you imagine this? Just drinking. How can I glorify God? By taking a sip of this water? By thanking him, by remembering that he's provided this water. There's a bunch of places where water does not taste this good. Bristol? Does water taste this good in Bristol? When I was in the UK, it didn't taste as
it doesn't taste.
In the US, it tastes like I'm drinking from a swimming pool. I mean, I can thank God, I can glorify God by taking a sip of water. Just remembering that, man, even the money I can buy my food with, you've given me the ability to work. You've given me the ability to earn money. And really, all this is your blessing given to us. And if I take a chunk of that money and I give it back to you, sort of like, here you go, God, you did a good job. Well, really, it's like borrowing. I remember when I was smaller, I would borrow from my dad for his birthday and ask if he could give me money so I could buy him a birthday gift. That's sort of what it's like when we say, here, God, take this money. It's for you. You did a good job. You're just giving back what he's already given to you. When you use my time, here, God, you're worthy of this time. An hour in my week. Well, he's given you that hour. And so everything that we do, we can never repay him for the blessings that he's given us. And in 2 Corinthians 5, we're told that every Christian has this ministry of reconciliation. That just as you and me, if you're a Christian, if you're a follower of Christ, then God has taken you and reconciled the relationship with God. And so in 2 Corinthians 5, he says, we all now, as all Christians, have the ministry of reconciliation. We have to go out now and reconcile others to God as we have been reconciled. And so one day I will die. One day my reputation will dissipate and become nothing. One day all of my physical work will become nothing. But I was just thinking about it the other day. Man, what a joy it is to know that on my deathbed, if God gives me sort of that time to reflect on life as I die, just to be able to think, man, God, how did you use me to do something of eternal significance? I know that my money will go to someone, my son or my daughter, and they will spend it well or not so well. You know, there's no hope in that. That will be gone one day. All of what I built with my hands will be gone one day. All my thoughts someone else will have greater thoughts than me. But one day, one thing I can celebrate in is that if I am taking a part of God's work, I can have hope that it has eternal significance, no matter how I die or when I die. And we can be glad, we can have hope that all of our toil has a purpose, that all of our toil has a significance. And our celebration is really in the sovereignty of God. God, we know that you're good. I may not understand all that you do, but I know that you're good, and I'm going to dwell in that fact. I'm going to trust you. I'm going to trust who you are. But Solomon is not done with talking about the sovereignty of God. He moves on to verses 16 through 22. And Man, I translated this quote to Icelandic. There's a guy named Chris Hedges. Does anyone know who he is? I've never heard of him before. But he said this: we live in a society where doctors ruin health, where lawyers ruin justice, where universities ruin knowledge, where governments ruin freedom, where media ruins information, where religion ruins good works, and where banks ruin the economic system. You can disagree or not. I disagree with him on certain things there, but here Solomon is saying something along those lines. He's saying in verse 16, moreover, I saw under the sun that in the place of justice, even there was wickedness. So he's saying, I look to the courts who are supposed to judge fairly. Like, what is that goddess who's usually outside of courts? She has a blindfold and she's holding weights and just sort of, you're supposed to be not picking sides and just judging fairly. It's an old Greek goddess. I don't remember her name. But here he's saying you can go to the courts and actually you don't see righteousness. You don't see the fact that people are punished for a crime. You don't see law upheld. You see wickedness. And in the place of righteousness, meaning in the place of worship, in the temple, I go and I see the praise, the wickedness. Where there's supposed to be good works and where there's supposed to be beauty, when they're supposed to uphold the truth of God, they're not. And so he's sort of saying along the lines of Chris Hedges, like courts are supposed to uphold the law and they're not. Temple is supposed to uphold the truth of God and they're not. And what does he say? He's really talking about the unrighteousness of, like, we can't have hope in the work of man. If man gets enough power, we will always be corrupt. If man gets enough power, we will always be corrupt. So where is our hope? Where is our hope for true justice? Let's think about a court that doesn't uphold justice, that doesn't give punishment to where punishment is due. Where's the hope for the individual who experiences the unrighteousness but gets no justice? Where's the hope for the individual who looks to the Christians or the church and he doesn't see a church living for the glory of God or upholding the truth of God? Where is his hope? Well, we can look to the one who is justice. We can look to the one who is righteousness, is the point of what Solomon is saying here. And that feeling that we get when we see something happen that's not righteous, we can experience hopelessness in that circumstances when we see just something not good happening. We can experience hopelessness, but here Solomon points to the hope that we have. One day, God will judge the righteous and the wicked. And I was remembering, there's an organization where they're fighting against human trafficking. There are more slaves in the world today than there have ever been in the world. More slaves today, and mostly it's sex slaves, and mostly it's girls under the age of like 14. And there's a museum, I think it's in D.C., where they're showing the reality. They're showing pictures of what, there's a police raid, and there were maybe 15 girls in a room, and they were being raped like 15 times a day. And they were just showing pictures of what it looked like. And a friend of mine went to this museum. I forgot what this museum is called. And he just came around the corner, and he saw pants from about a 9-year-old girl. There was just blood everywhere. And they found this at one of those places. And he remembered at that time saying, there have been times where I'm not okay with hell. But when I think about that girl and I think about her praying to God, would you just kill me now? Would you just get it over with? Would this stop? And then the guy who probably did this has probably done this to plenty of other girls. And in this life, there may be no one that shows him righteous. There's no one maybe who punishes punishes him for what he deserves. And he said to me, at that time, I was thankful for God for hell. Because I know the hope that I have, and one day, each and every one of us will stand before God. And there's a bunch of people, in our society where sin is sort of tucked away and hidden away, and we don't see the bloody pants of a 9-year-old girl. That we could be mad at God. God, why would you do this thing? Hell seems so harsh. But here Solomon, oddly enough, looks to the righteousness of God, and he has hope. Because he sees the courts of the land are incapable of holding righteousness. He sees the church or the temple at this time is incapable of upholding the truth of God. But one day, all of us will stand before God, and righteousness will have victory. He will judge righteously. And he will be glorified. Either, for some of us, he will be glorified for his grace and mercy, that we deserve punishment, yet he has paid the debt that we could not pay. And for some, he will be glorified for his righteous justice. One way or another, every life on this world will glorify God in the end. And that is, oddly enough, Solomon's hope. As he sees the injustice, as he sees the suffering, he looks to a God that is righteous and is justice. And so he points out this, in a lot of senses, we are nothing, we're just beasts. If you don't have God central to your life, all you are is a beast. All you are is another animal living on this planet, and you have no hope. Who are you? What is the joy? And he's reversing this idea. He's really calling forth the people and dealing with the original sin of human being. What is the original sin of humans? It's we were created in the image of God, but we didn't settle for that. We wanted to be God. And so here he's saying, if you think you're God, let me tell you, you're a beast. You're nothing other than an animal living on this world. You have nothing other above the fact that God has created you in his image. You have nothing, you have no advantages over any other animals living on this planet. You have no idea what even happens when someone dies or how it works. All you can do is trust God. Like you don't see righteousness. You're not standing on the throne. And you can have hope in what the fact that God has done these things, so that he is what he says he is. And so he sees our inadequacy to understand, and he points to God. He sees the inadequacy to understand his full plan, and he points to the fact that he is gracious and good, and we have hope in that. And he sees the inadequacies and even all the works of man, that one day it all disappears and becomes nothing. And he points to God. And all points to one place. Our experience in this world, be it joy, be it suffering, in that we can have rest in the fact that God is sovereign. In our suffering and in our joy, he points to God. What is the point of toil of man? God knows. You may not understand right now, but he knows. And in our sort of lack of understanding and the works of man becoming nothing, he says the work of God stands forever and his wisdom is forever. And in our own inadequacies of even showing justice or upholding the truths and righteousness of God, he points to him. He can. And so a lot of people think Ecclesiastes is a down book, sort of like a downer book. Well, really, he's always pointing to the reality of God does these things. God does. God is justice. And we seek to understand, and beginning of science was really initiated by a lot of Christians. And so they started out with the idea that God is a God who is an orderly God, and his creation is in line with his order. And so I can seek to understand creation and expect there to be order to it. And so they sought to understand the laws of physics, for instance, and so on and so forth. And they started to really explore creation to show the majesty of the Creator. And we see in Psalm 19, this reality of someone, the psalmist writing, the heaven declares the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims his handiwork. Day to day pours out speech, and night to night reveals knowledge. There is no speech, nor are there words whose voice is not heard. Their voice goes out through all the earth, and their words to the end of the world. In them he has set a tent for the sun. And so there, a lot of people have found initiative to go and seek to know God through the order of his creation, and how beautiful the skies are. Like he says here, the sky above proclaims his handiwork. How glorious is he. And so we will seek to understand, but realizing that we will never fully understand. As Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 13:12, for now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I have been fully known. And so in the fact that we don't understand God, why would you allow this to happen? You know, this suffering is a lot of suffering. Why am I experiencing these things? Why are you blessing me in this way? Why did you bless me in such a way to give me this husband or this wife or this job or this house? But we don't understand fully. We're looking at reality through a mirror dimly, but one day we will know fully as we are fully known. We will see him face to face, and our tears will be wiped away. And so my final thoughts is this. You may be looking at the back of the knitted shirt, and you see this sort of mirror dimly reality. You see a pattern there, but it doesn't look beautiful to you, quite as beautiful as the other side. But that we have hope in the fact that he is working, even though we don't see it. And even though you might walk through a reality that is painful, and you might walk through a reality where you're just exploding with excitement and joy for the fact that he's blessed you in such a way, whatever we go through, we're going to hope that he knows what he's doing. That he is righteous, that he is almighty, he's sovereign, and in that lays our hope. Like Romans 8:28 says that we know that for those who are called by God and loved by God, all things work together for the good of those. Well, a few verses later, he talks about what can separate me from the love of God. Can sword, can hardship, can murder, nothing, none of these things can take me away from the reality of God loves me. And so it's amazing to see that in that reality, all things work together for the good of those who are called according to his purpose and loved by God. That's not just sort of a good idea. It's like, I'm going to try to do these things. In the fact that God is sovereign over all of creation, we can know he does these things. It's not just sort of like, I'll try to do my best to work all things for good. But that because he's sovereign, because he's Lord of all, we can know that this is not just a good idea or a thinking that he wants to do, but rather a promise that he will keep. And C.S. Lewis wrote that, Sophia, I could see you. C.S. Lewis wrote that if I find within myself an experience, a longing that nothing in life can satisfy, then the most obvious conclusion is that I was made for another life. Or if nothing in this world can satisfy the longing within me, then the most logical conclusion is that I was made for another world. And so when we see that righteousness is not righteous, we can look to the one who is righteousness. When we see that our works goes to nothing, we can look to the one whose works stand forever. And when we see just how broken and messed up this world is, we can look to the great physician to make things right. And it's amazing how this hope never dies out in everything that we do. And so when we go into life, we have this hope. No matter what comes, no matter what tomorrow brings, we have hope that God knows what he's doing. And you might not see everything, full beauty of his work, but we trust and know that he is good and that he is sovereign and that we have hope no matter what comes.